Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a podcast where interesting people come and tell about the stories they've crafted. As for myself, I'm an author. I've created novels, short stories, novellas, and even poetry. If you'd like to find out more about what I've done, please go to my website, ericpbishop.com. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to another episode of A Tale of Two Scribes, and tonight I'm excited. We have New York Times best-selling author Meg Gardner here. Hey, Meg.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. It's been I believe we met back at Thriller Fest, and that had to have been several years back though, because I haven't been at Thriller Fest since pre-pandemic. So
Mhm.
it's been a little while.
Yeah, but those years add up, and they've there's been a lot going on, and good things for you and for me too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of those interesting journeys. Unfortunately, with this medium, I get to talk to writers once a week, and we get to see just how everybody got their start, how they find time to write. For some people, like myself, I have a full-time job, I have kids, and writing happens in its place, but it's in its place. It's
Right.
not something I get to do as often as I probably would like, but that's okay because then you have to be very dedicated with it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a passion, but it's work. It's a craft. You have to
Mhm.
make time and dedicate the time and realize that that's okay.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I want to ask you to start with, which I think is interesting, because I've thought about this for a while now as I've talked to some other authors, and some of my favorite authors I found actually started as lawyers and became writers. David Baldacci, especially, was one
Right.
that years ago
Mhm.
I didn't even know he was a former lawyer until I started reading his books, and it's like, man, these are really good. It's like, how long has he been writing? And then I looked in his background, and I was just like, oh, he's a lawyer. Interesting. And
Mhm.
as I got involved in the process and started writing, I got in contact with Brad Meltzer. Again, another person that started in the law field. His first job there was up in Boston, I believe, and then started writing a book. While he was getting into the field. So maybe you can answer for me. Why do lawyers write, but why do lawyers become successful writers? What's the magic sauce there?
Well, if you're a trial lawyer, then you're used to dealing with stories. Every case is a story. It's a narrative of how
Mhm.
something went wrong between parties, between
Between
two
parties.
people. And it's your job, literally, to present your client's story. You're
Mhm.
required by the canons of ethics to present your client's story in as compelling and persuasive manner as you can.
Mhm.
So lawyers tend to have personalities too. They like to spread it out, the story, and we're trained to know how to persuade. We're trained
Mhm.
to find the we're trained to understand how the opposing counsel is going to come back at us to
Mhm.
try to knock down our arguments, which is good training for identifying plot holes.
Yeah, that's true.
And also, I mean, I think just like so many people, lawyers have a dream
Mhm.
that we'll be able to turn our imaginations into magic and have other people relate to them. Also, when you write a novel, if that plot hole stays and the characters all fall into it, they're not going to go to jail. They're
Mhm.
not going to lose a judgment and have their house repossessed or foreclosed. So it's a little bit, you don't literally have a judge up there telling you how
Right.
you've screwed up. It's
Yeah.
the pressure is a little bit less than that.
I guess that makes sense, especially for trial lawyers, because I've served on the jury once, so my court experience is extremely minimal, gladly, and I hope that continues the rest of my life. I'll keep obeying the law and keeping making sure I'm out of those situations. But I would assume you're painting a picture of what happened in the case, and you're telling a story, really, is what you're doing. Um,
Exactly.
so.
And you're human. And you have all the characters. You have your client who may be a plaintiff or a defendant.
Mhm.
You are painting them as sympathetically as the facts and the law permit. You're personalizing them, you're humanizing them, just like we do in a novel,
Yeah.
where we want to make sure that everybody seems human.
Right. No, that completely makes sense. Okay. Well, I think I see more of it of why lawyers do so well with this. But yeah, it's one of those things where it kind of
We're competitive. We want to get a book out there and have people tell us they love it because the judge may not.
that's a very, very good point. But yeah, no, when I years ago when I started looking at it, I was just like, wow, that's interesting. Because the amazing thing about writing is people from all kinds of backgrounds get into it. And one thing I've definitely noticed, for myself, for other writers that are friends, is it's extremely rare that it's the first thing they do when they, become an adult. When they get,
Mhm.
the first job isn't normally to go out and write a novel. Probably because it's not a job that pays much money for most people, especially when they first get started. It's hard
It's
to make a
nothing you
living.
can, it's nothing you can count on, let's put it that
Right.
way.
Right, exactly. And so, but definitely in the experience I've seen and just what I observed is for most people, they end up having a career and writing almost becomes either their side career, side hobby, what that turns into something, or even a lot of times people, it becomes their full-time job after they have completed a career, um,
Right. Yeah.
which is pretty,
And I loved my legal practice, and it was extremely challenging and rewarding in many ways.
mhm.
I did want to write, and I knew also after I was practicing, after I had three small children, that arguing for a living probably wasn't going to be that healthy for me long term. So I'm glad I was able to eventually traverse various paths and get to creative writing.
So the arguing that had to happen at that point is just within your head almost of just like, how am I
Correct.
going to figure
Yeah,
this
I
out?
mean, I mean, I always wanted to be a writer, and my parents didn't discourage me.
Hmm.
They said, do whatever you can, do whatever you want. And my dad was an English professor, so he knew the love of literature. His books were his life. But
Right.
as soon as I kind of said, I kind of like the idea of being a writer. I kind of have this passion. I kind of think that if I don't do it, it'll like kill me. And he's
Hmm.
like, fantastic, do it. But how are you going to put food on the table?
Right.
So, and I know how to take a hint.
Well, and that's,
So,
I think, one of the beauties about it, though, is and I've alluded to this in other authors I've talked to, other podcasts I've filmed, is it's not something that you have a short time frame. It's not like you're trying to win an NBA championship. Okay, you have to get this skill set perfected by a certain age because your body's going to wear out. You're not going to be able to compete at a level. The beauty of writing is whether you're a kid. I mean, even kids can get stuff published, or you can be right there at the end of a life cycle and can, as long as you've got your mental faculties, you can still keep knocking out or can write your first book even.
exactly. Listen, there's no licensing requirement to be a writer. You
Right.
don't have to have a degree. I don't have a degree in creative writing. You don't have to
Mhm.
pass a test to be certified as a novelist. You can do it anytime from any launching point in
Mhm.
your life. And you mentioned the age. I was Norman MacLean, who wrote A River Runs Through It. He wasn't published till he was in his 70s.
Mhm.
So don't ever let anything like that stop you. If you want to do it, I mean, there's no guarantees, but go for it.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I always tell people too is there's no guarantees with it, but also if you don't finish something, nothing's going to happen with it. If it's because I know so many people that will start it, or I've just in the last, I've been writing 10 years now, seriously, took it
Mhm.
as a serious thing for 10 years. And I can't even count how many people I've talked to, be like, yeah, I would love to write a novel. And I'll always say, well, why don't you? Ah, man, that's hard. And I'm like, well, life's hard. Hard is not the excuse. What's the reason keeping you? Well, what it ends up coming down to is they don't want to put in the effort it takes to see something through to its completion. And I think they could if they got over that mental block, basically, of thinking it's too hard. And it's like, well, yeah, if you look at a 100,000 word novel, that's a lot of commitment. That's a lot of writing. Okay, well, write 500 words a day. And take it, it's how do you eat an elephant? Well, one bite at a
Exactly.
time.
It's a big project, so start with something.
Yeah,
But if it's calling to you, start.
start. Now, I'm trying to remember. I think if I remember correctly, you were actually published over in UK
Mhm.
before the United States, right?
Correct. I was living in England. My husband's job had taken us and our family to the UK, and I started, well, I went over without a job. It was his job that that was transferred to England. So I knew that this it was a rare interlude, probably, where I did not have to go into the office every day. All the kids were at least in preschool, and it was time to put up or shut up because I probably wasn't going to get another opportunity to have
Hmm.
uninterrupted hours to do this thing. And I've been talking about writing a novel, so I
Yeah.
did, and I wrote a terrible novel, and I put it in the put it in the trunk, and I wrote another one. um, and yeah, it got. I was published in the UK by Hodder and Stoughton, which is part of Hachette
Yeah.
now, and uh, then published everywhere in the world, essentially, except the United
Yep.
States
Right.
for a number of years. So
Okay.
I couldn't complain
Hmm.
because I was doing this thing that I had always dreamed of doing,
Right.
but nobody at home could find my books anywhere, not in the
Hmm.
library or at at Barnes and Noble. So I was frustrated,
Yeah.
and I but I did eventually get published in the United States, which was fantastic.
And the part on that story is, if I recall, the person that I think had a play in that was, I think Stephen King um
Indeed.
yeah. So talk about that for people, because I that's one of those figures that for people is this mythical, like it's Stephen King, and it's Stephen King, but you never know. Stephen King could still
You never
find your
know.
work.
And Stephen
And
King is an, a voracious reader,
right.
and he supports other authors. He supports artists across every creative spectrum. And he's also published in the UK by Hodder. And naturally they send him and have for decades boxes and boxes of books,
Hmm.
hoping he'll pick one up and enjoy it. And he had been stuffing them in a closet for years until one one time he was heading to London for a book tour, and he needed
Okay.
something to read on the plane, and he pulled my first novel, China Lake, out of the box, and he thought that the font was nice and big and wouldn't strain his eyes. So the font gods smiled on me, but he loved it, and it was as I found out, and he read all the rest of my books and discovered that I didn't have a U.S. publisher, and he urged people in the United States to seek my books out. And he wrote a column for Entertainment Weekly, and surprise, surprise, surprise. Within 48 hours of that, after the big dog barked,
Yeah.
a bunch of American publishers had taken a second look. And
Hmm.
this is was luck. It was serendipity, but this was after years of working, and I was also at a point where I had something completely new that I was working on, and it was ready to go. So
Okay.
I always tell people, yes, it was good fortune, but when opportunity knocks, be
Right.
ready to answer the door. And who knows what's going to happen? There's never a guarantee, but go
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah. Well, and that's where you have to put yourself out there. You have to keep, creating. And then there's a lot of things that I've had this conversation with a lot of people. They say, well, such and such got lucky. And I've
Mhm.
never bought into that, only because I look at it as, okay, something positive happened to them, something that was probably completely out of control. But I always go back to the first point in the story is, who created that novel or who created that
Mhm.
song.
Mhm.
And so they had to do that first step, and then things fell into place. Well, again, I think though it's where you're putting yourself out there, and it's not negating luck. I don't believe in it. I believe more in a fate type of thing, personally. But again, how you get there doesn't matter. It's the question of, you can
Mhm.
get there though. The only way you don't get there is if you go, man, I'm only published in the UK. I'm only published here. I can't get in the US market. Maybe this isn't for me.
Mhm.
Well, maybe you just need to keep writing more. Maybe you just need to get out. Maybe you need to go to more conferences. Maybe you need
You
to.
do, and yeah, and that's not to say that if something's not working, just keep doing the same thing that's not working.
Correct.
It's wise to take a step back and try to be clear-eyed about what your goals are. What are you writing? If it's writing, are you writing to the best of your ability?
Right.
And is that something that you can do you need to study and work and read and practice a lot more to really elevate elevate your game? So I think a lot of times there is luck or fate, or something crossing paths at a fortuitous moment, but it's never just that.
Yeah. No, and I agree. I completely agree with what you're saying. You have to just, it's something that, and it's always evolving. You're always there. You never, I would put you in a successful role for a writer with the accolades you've gotten, with the success you've had. But that doesn't mean Meg just says, "Hey, cool, I can push the cruise control button now, and I never have to think about another book because I'm a '1 New York Times bestselling author, Meg Gardner."
That's
Doesn't
where
work.
I find your car in the ditch down the road because
Right,
you've dozed
exactly.
off. Right.
Exactly. And you also, I know this for myself, is you always, getting a book out is an incredible experience. It's such a great feeling. This year we get to both have that experience on the same day,
It's amazing.
which
It's
is so
amazing.
cool.
Yes.
Shadow Heart's out, Breach of Trust is out,
And congratulations, by the way. I see it there on
thank you. Yeah,
shelf.
it is
Yes.
back there. We'll have a virtual toast on the 18th.
Okay.
So this will come out a few days after. So we'll both be out by this point. So we already are congratulating.
Okay.
We already did it. We already
Right.
got it.
Yes.
So,
We
but no,
killed
it's
it. We killed it.
killed it. You probably sold more copies than me, but that's okay. I still love you.
You never know.
No, you will. And I'm cool with that because you deserve it. No, where I want to go with that though is the fact that you get that book out and that feeling is great. You know that feeling. I've only known that feeling. This will be my third time knowing that feeling, and I'm looking forward to that feeling. But you want it again. It does. It's like anything in life. You have a
Mhm.
really good meal at a fancy restaurant. You don't wake up the next morning and go, "I'm good. I don't have to eat anything anymore. This is wonderful." It's like, no, you're like, can I go back there again? What's the
Mhm.
how much was that? Can we swing that
I'm
again?
not
So
done. I'm not done. I have a bottomless appetite. Yes.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I've told that to folks as well of, they're like, "Well, you ever see yourself getting to a point where you don't want to write again?" It's like, man, I hope not. I hope I don't get to this. I hope I don't get to that stage where I'm either not capable of doing it, or I'm like, I'm out of stories. I'm done. There's nothing else to say. And it's just like, nah, I got a while to
Right.
go, I think.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Or if you start feeling that way, that you could um step into some other creative
Yeah.
well that would fill you up, either just personally or professionally, and then come back to writing or not.
Right. Well, and let's segue. That's a good segue for saying to step into something else. So we have Meg Gardner, the writer, and
Mhm.
also we have Meg Gardner, the writer, who has done a book, a follow-up book to what a lot of people will say is probably their top 10 or top 20 movie of all time, including this. I don't have like a
Good.
I don't
Right
have a
answer.
list. I don't have a list of all my favorite, although probably Back to the Future is probably number one if I really, because that's nostalgia for me. That was me when I was a kid. But Heat is up there as like, I mean, I just showed it to my son for the first time a couple months ago, and I even mentioned the fact of like, hey, I know the person that wrote the second book for that. He's like, wait, there's a
Oh.
book for it. So talk about how Heat 2 happened, and then also what was it like to step into a world that is pretty ravenous fans that movie's almost like a canon. It's religious for some
Right.
folks.
Well, yes, of course, Heat has become now uh, a classic drama. The writer and director Michael Mann, he
Mhm.
won't call it a crime film, a crime movie, but it's a drama with cops and robbers at its center. And I presume everybody knows about the story, but if they don't, it's about master thief Neil McCauley and his crew, who are taking down scores in Los Angeles, and the relentless and brilliant and driven LAPD homicide detective Vincent Hanna, played by Al Pacino, who is after him, and
Mhm.
their conflict, their rapport, and their inevitable deadly confrontation at the end, because you've got two two predators out there
Mhm.
hunting, and they're never both going to walk away. So Michael had written the backstories for all the major characters in the film. He's known these people intimately since he
Mhm.
created them for now decades. And he wrote long biographies for Hannah and
Mhm.
Macaulay and Christopher Hurlis, who's played by Val Kilmer,
Yeah.
and knowing that none of that material was going to appear on screen, but he gave it to the actors, and so
Mhm.
that it would inform their performances.
Mhm.
And he then he decided that there was so much story both before and after the events of Heat that he wanted to tell those stories, and he
Yeah.
wanted to do it as a novel.
Mhm.
So he asked if I would collaborate with him because he's a brilliant writer.
Mhm.
Clearly, this was his first novel, so he wanted to work with a novelist who had done this before.
And how did you get that call? Like, how did that come through your agent, or how were
Yes,
you? Okay.
we share a literary agent
Gotcha. Okay.
who asked me if I was interested, which made me take a deep breath. Needless to say, but, when you find out your icon is interested in talking to you
Yeah.
about such a
Absolutely.
such a daunting project. But then I realized, the little devil on my shoulder said, "Oh, come on, you've always wanted to write a heist novel. And when will anybody ever get the chance to write
Right.
a heist novel with the characters from Heat with
Yeah.
a man?" So I threw myself on the project, and we talked a lot. We outlined, we kibitzed, we hashed out the story,
Mhm.
uh, and just worked through draft after draft. And by the end, by the editing, the polishing, we were swapping pages back and
Mhm.
forth and on the phone constantly, sitting across his desk, just wrestling this thing to the ground. And but you never
Those
know.
first few moments when you're getting the pages from him, or when you're sitting across from him, are you pinching yourself at all, or is it by that point it's settled in and you're just like, okay, this is cool.
No, you do pinch yourself, but and of course, we could talk about it all we wanted, but
Mhm.
he needed to know whether I had the chops to
Right.
to help him realize his ambitions for this
Yeah.
story. So I said, Michael, I'm gonna have to write something,
Right.
and you tell me. And I'm thinking, like, please, I'm crossing my fingers that are you gonna like it? And he did. So we
Mhm.
continued.
Yeah.
But you are right. Heat has become such an indelible film that it does have
Yeah.
super fans, and you don't know how people are going to react to
Mhm.
something new. Well, you know what fandoms can be like.
Right.
So we were extremely proud of the book, but we did not know what the reaction would be.
Mhm.
However, I went to see a screening of Heat in New York City at the Tribeca Film
Okay.
Festival, where De Niro and Al Pacino were interviewed about it. And
Mhm.
before they even fired up the projector, I mean, there were people in the audience screaming lines from the movie at Al Pacino, screaming lines at him. So I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, there's a lot of super fans here.
Yeah.
But when the movie played, it was clear that there were um, so many people, say even in their 20s, in the audience who had never seen it before. And
Mhm.
I know that because at dire turning points in the film, there were just audible gasps in the
Gasps. Yeah.
theater. So
Yep.
there's a new audience for it as well, and they were just as gripped as all the rest of us who had already seen it
Yep.
45 times. And thank God, though, the readers loved it. But they
Yeah.
loved it. Mhm.
Yeah, when it came out, and I saw for I got my copy. I saw some of the reviews for it, and yeah, the feedback was so incredible. Because even myself, I was a huge I've had that movie in DVD. I had it in VHS, back in the, it's just like yeah, wore that out probably. Actually, my DVD got scratched at some point, and I went to go play. This is a while back. I went to go put it in, and it wouldn't. It got to like, I don't know, 45-minute, 50-minute in, and it just stopped. And I took the DVD out and I rubbed it and I scrubbed it and I put it back in. It would never go past that point. and I'm jumping on Amazon going, okay, where can I get it? I don't want to
Mhm.
really go pay $30 for it. I've seen this movie 50 times probably in my life. So I was able to find it for a good rate online, no problem. And I didn't want a digital version. I wanted that. I wanted a physical copy so I could, bring it with me wherever I'm going, although the digital you really can as well. But it's the one thing that, not the one thing, but it's one of those movies that's just, it's held up to time. Which a lot
It
of them,
doesn't age.
no.
You don't get tired of watching it. There's always something new that you see, that you understand, some new facet of the characters that even in the smallest moments you realize what's being revealed about this people. Like I read, there's the moment right before the huge shootout after the bank robbery in downtown
Mhm.
LA, when that whole shootout it's massive and it's overpowering and it's loud,
Yeah.
but even under gunfire, you see the characters being who they are.
Hmm.
That the just before when Hannah arrives, just as he's about to get out of the patrol car, the thing he's loading his shotgun, and he tells everybody else in the car, "Watch your background."
Watch back.
Telling them to protect the civilians, to
Yep.
protect everybody else on the street who's not involved.
Hmm.
Whereas the Whereas Michael Sharito, the lovable dad of the bank robbery crew, immediately takes a 5-year-old
Takes a kid,
hostage
right.
as a human shield.
I used to go out to LA with a little bit of frequency for work, and one of the times I was there, I was just like, okay, I gotta go find where they shot, and I did, because the joy of Google and stuff is you can find stuff. And the only other movie I did that to was after college. A friend of ours was getting married, and we went up to Grosse Pointe, Michigan, where they filmed Grosse Point Blank, which is like Grosse Point Blank might be a spot ahead of Heat in the top
It's
canon of movies.
brilliant. It's wonderful. I went to an event for the Grosse Pointe Library, and the reason I went was because I could go see where they filmed Grosse Pointe Blank.
Me and my buddy, he's actually, we talked offline. He's the buddy that's here this weekend. That's retired military. We're going to the U.S. Open. We drove all around town trying, because at that point, you didn't really have the technology you had now is readily available to you. And I think it was
Mhm.
2000, 99, 2000, something like that. And so we just drove every road looking. Oh, that's where they filmed that. This is where they filmed this. That's the outside of the school. Oh, this was
Uh-huh.
definitely where they did the where the radio station was.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was just one of those fun. It's in the amazing thing of that is that's how movies endear themselves to people as well as books do as well. So,
Mhm.
people have their favorites and they have ones that they'll go and pick back up again. So the power of the written word, can't be overstated.
Right, right. But you are the second person this week who has said that he went to on a pilgrimage to downtown Los Angeles
Yeah.
to see the location of the
It's
of the
it's much better to go there than the Hollywood Walk of Fame, I'll tell you. It's the Hollywood Walk of Fame is a little bit dirtier than you think, and not as depending on which part of it. The
uh-huh.
the theater's not bad. The theater area is not
Right,
bad,
right.
but yeah, no, that's cool. So you are now part of that cultural icon, really, which is pretty amazing.
It is. I'm still amazed and thrilled that I mean I got to spend a year and a half with Neil McCauley and
Yeah,
Chris Earlis and Vincent Hanna and more
pretty
characters
pretty amazing. And
by
then
my
I
side.
I believe there's definitely rumors that they're going to be working on sometime this year, and maybe they've already started it. We just don't know it. That they're going to be actually working on the adaptation for the film for it.
Yes, Michael is writing the script, and I that's all I can say.
We won't try to pry any more out of you because we know some powerful people like Michael. So we'll just keep quiet. That's awesome. Um, So let's jump into the world of unsub.
Mhm.
So this is something that, and one of the questions I had for you is there's such a good series of books and there's so much like we'll say dark suspense to it. There's so many storylines. So
I
how
just
does
I
a
just I just raised my eyebrows. They're like, ha ha ha, yeah.
how does a mom of three how do you get there? Where do the ideas flow from for the next book, and then Do you find it difficult to sometimes go in those really dark places where the story takes you?
Yes and no. And I will start by explaining that the book we're talking about now is Shadowheart, which
Shadowheart.
is number 4 in the Unsub series,
Hmm.
about Caitlin Hendricks, a young FBI agent who hunts serial predators.
Hmm.
And where do the ideas come from? The first book, Unsub, came from growing up in California and seeing a picture of the Zodiac killer in the
Zodiac.
newspaper, the police sketch of the Zodiac killer.
Yeah.
And, I'm like, Daddy, who's this guy with the hood over his head with the weird symbols on it? And my father had to explain to this little Catholic schoolgirl what a serial killer was.
Hmm.
So I've probably kept my windows locked for a decade after that. But all the books have got at their not at their spark is always a real case,
Hmm.
something authentic, infamous case of some murderer and how it affected a community, a society, the country.
Hmm.
And then unsub, I presume your knowledgeable audience knows that unsub stands for unknown subject, which is FBI lingo for
Hmm.
the unidentified perpetrator that they are seeking to uncover and
Hmm.
capture. So I thought, who are we going to have chasing in my novel where things can turn out the way I want them to? The Zodiac has never been captured. It's
Hmm.
never been identified officially. Could still be out there. I mean, the first book started me thinking, okay, the Zodiac stopped of his own volition.
Yeah.
What's to stop him from deciding to pick up where he left off? So that was the start of that case, set in
Hmm.
the Bay Area about a Zodiac like killer
Hmm.
who does pick up again after 25 years. And Caitlin is a young detective who wants the case and gets involved in that and is recruited by the FBI. So she is bright and driven and the daughter of a cop, which was her destiny, of course, then to put on a badge.
Hmm.
So I love writing about her. I love putting her up against the wall and forcing her to go through hell in these books for the purpose of giving my readership a wonderful, intriguing, gripping, mysterious story that I hope
Hmm.
will keep them up all night and make sure they don't turn off the lights. I was completely ignoring your question, which is where does this stuff come from? And
I I noticed, and I won't ask twice because I now I'm afraid that, like you said, we haven't caught the
no,
Zodiac killer, so I don't know.
mommy takes the little kids to Cub Scouts and sees that the den leader is mean, and so she decides to put that person in a novel. I get more adept at developing seemingly innocuous characters into psychopaths, as happens in real life,
That's
And
hilarious.
my editor said, "Can you write a scary story?" And I said, "I think I can do that." And I
Yeah.
had a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
uh, readers dive into thrillers knowing that they're hoping that you're going to take them on a roller coaster
Hmm.
ride, but also trusting you as an author that you're going to bring them out
Right.
safe.
Yeah, you're gonna give them something at the end that they're not just totally depressed or totally like, really, the bad guy won out and killed the whole family or da 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 and got away with it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it is about putting characters through the trials, but
mhm.
hoping that they rise to the occasion and seeing how they, through ingenuity, brains, brawn, training, creativity, whatever, they try to overcome all the obstacles on their quest.
Did you like with Heat 2, you were able to have that time, with just an absolute brilliant director with working on a series dealing with the FBI, did any opportunities open up to interact with real FBI agents or anything dealing with the bureau?
Yes, and
Okay.
not like shadowing an agent,
Yeah.
going through a workday, but you and I have both been to Thriller Fest, and
Hmm.
the International Thriller Writers has several times arranged a day at the FBI's field division in
Yeah,
Manhattan
in Manhattan, I did that. Yeah.
for writers,
Right.
where senior agents would talk from various various areas, counterterrorism, organized crime, cyber, would talk to us about their work and the cases that they're handling, which was extremely illuminating
Hmm.
and extraordinarily helpful. Of course, the FBI uh, wants to make sure that writers present it accurately and
Right.
favorably. So
Yeah.
it was generous of them. And they knew what they were hoping to get across to us, but it was extraordinarily helpful. And same with the ATF, the Bureau of
Hmm.
Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. They did a whole day at Thriller Fest one time, and in the Unsub series, Caitlin's boyfriend is an explosives expert for
Hmm.
the ATF, and so that was also extremely helpful. I mean, aside from reading biographies
Yeah.
or reading, how the bureaus, the BAU got started,
Hmm.
it's it's wonderful just to observe and interact with people, whether it's law enforcement or any job.
Yeah.
That's how you find out what people's lives are like
Yep.
and why they do this, what pulled them into it, what keeps them there, even under difficult circumstances. So
Yeah.
it's very rewarding as a writer.
Those are the fun parts for me. So I now have multiple close connections with people that were Secret Service.
Mhm.
And so there's some things they can tell me because it's just common knowledge. There's other things
Right.
they can't even begin to tell me. But because my Body Man series obviously focuses on so much on the Secret Service, and then also I have a novel I started a while ago that I put aside that I'll get back to. That one's going to be even deeper in, to have that hands-on where I can, text someone and be like, "Hey, what's the even just the terminology?" Just because, yeah, you can Google a lot of things, you can read a lot of books on it, but it does make a difference, I think, to talk to someone that's an actual seasoned agent,
Right.
to kind of get there. Like, well, yeah, that's what they call it on the outside, or that's what people say it is, but here in the office, this is what we refer to it as. And
Mhm.
even if Joe Reader will never know that you were accurate or not with that, I think as a writer, it makes me feel a lot better knowing that even though I'm not that role and never would be that role, I know enough about it to intelligently speak about it.
Right. We make it up, but we want to tell the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I was going to mention too with the FBI, because I did take I think it was 2017 or 18, 2017. I think I did the FBI field office. And that was an interesting class with Thriller Fest.
Mhm.
I think it was on a Monday. It was the first day
Mhm.
there at Thriller Fest. And then that for me opened up an opportunity where, and I think it was David Morrell that actually had mentioned he did the FBI Citizens Academy.
Mhm.
So I started getting information about that. And then another fellow writer I know graduated from or went through the process, not really a graduation, but did the
Mhm.
program. It's like a 10-week class. And the only way to get in that is to get recommended. So I looked in that next year, the FBI office here in Greenville, South Carolina, like an hour from me, was having a class. So this writer recommended me. I was able to get on it, and for 10 weeks, I think it was on a Tuesday. I'd be there from like 8 to 9:30, just in this classroom, and it was funny
Cool.
because they were trying to basically they foster a relationship with people in the community because the
Mhm.
FBI has good reputation and bad reputation, and the FBI wants to give their truth, I guess you could say, to the people
Right.
out in the community to say, you hear a lot of stuff about us, don't be afraid because this is what our job actually is. And
Mhm.
so each night we met, they would focus on something different. And half the people that were there, though, you could tell didn't want to be there. They were probably forced by their job or whatever, and they just weren't that
Oh,
engaged with it.
uh-huh.
Versus I'm
That's a
sitting there with my
shame. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, and I was the one, and literally by the second class, they would just be like, "Hey, writer," and I'm like, "Yes." I'm the goofy guy in the back, or not in the back, but you want to do this, and it ended up, and I don't think I stepped on any toes, but I wore the bomb suit. I got polygraphed. I did like every night they had something
Fun.
they want to do. They would like, "You want to do it?" And I'm like, I didn't come here to just be lectured,
Uh-huh. Right.
So great experience. And then, but that did transition then when I go to write stuff, getting that kind of not, hands on with a case, but like, and I've talked about it before, I think in other podcasts, I've definitely talked it with other writers. One of the nights, it was all just about all the sexually related crimes, especially with kidnapping and basically with kids.
Right,
And as a dad, that was the worst night. I don't know how else to put it
right. I'm sure. Yeah.
because they went through and they would leave details out, of course, not to be
Uh-huh.
overtly graphic, but they were telling you what they had to investigate and
Right.
the pedophiles and all the online stings they would do, and it just was like it made you like, can I let my daughter and my son leave the house? Because it was just
No,
like,
no, it
oh my
is, and it's you
goodness.
do see the behind the shiny suit that these people are they are shouldering a load on behalf of us.
Right.
My law school classmates uh, went to Interpol. Oh, he was the Secretary General of Interpol, and figured out ways for Interpol to unmask a number of international child sexual
Mhm.
predators.
Yep.
As well. So he ended up with them and with Al Qaeda, after having to mask his identity in ways. But I'm glad that people are out there who are willing to try to keep us safe.
Yeah.
But back quickly now to the world of fiction, if you don't
Yes.
mind. I showed you Shadowheart. Wanted to go on about the FBI. One of the story starts in Shadowheart with Caitlin being asked to interview a convicted killer, which is how the behavioral analysis unit did get its start. So that's a bit of a kernel of truth for this story. There's the killer in this book who's behind bars. Never confessed, never confessed his guilt even after his conviction. But once he's in prison, he starts spontaneously confessing to a
Mm.
bunch of other murders
Hmm.
and drawing sketches of the victims he claims to have killed across the country over the course of 20 years,
Right.
as the Samuel Little did a number of years ago,
Hmm.
who the FBI got involved with that, with putting out his very haunting, eerie, uh, individuated sketches of many people that he said he'd killed, and the FBI and law enforcement was able to confirm
Hmm.
a lot of them. So we've got this killer confessing. Caitlin thinks she's going to analyze him, see if he's lying,
Hmm.
uh, whether there's a bunch of cold cases that the Bureau is going to be able to help law enforcement close, and instead another killer starts
Duplicated. Okay.
duplicating goods murders, and not simply a copycat. It seems that he's a competitor in
Mm.
some way to Good, who is behind bars. But Caitlin knows he's a manipulative psychopath, and that the fact that you're in a cell doesn't mean you're harmless.
Hmm.
So she is trying to figure out who's playing whom. Are they all trying to play her? She has to investigate two, not just one, but two dark and twisted minds, and figure out what the game is that these two killers are doing and
Hmm.
why they are involved in this seeming rivalry. In the meantime, families of the missing are desperate to find out if their loved ones are one of Good's victims. Caitlin has to deal with a spunky, uh, very sharp teenager who is determined that her mother get justice, that she
Hmm.
must have been one of the victims, and just what an FBI agent needs is a teenager wanting to carry out her own investigation in the midst of all of this. So that it throws a wrench into things, but it's not just a totally unconnected wrench, let's say.
I have two in my house currently, and I can attest to the fact of teenagers can be very persuasive.
Yes.
So how has it been? So when you got in and started the first one, did you immediately think, okay, I want to try to do a serial, not serial might be the wrong term with that, but did you want to do a series? And did you,
Yes,
okay.
I was in the mood for a series. I'd written several standalones. This is my third series,
Yeah.
and I've written four standalones now, and I love doing both, but I was in the mood for a series, and I realized if I was going to be writing thrillers with a crime bent, that probably having someone who is in law enforcement would be a good way to make sure the series can continue.
Mhm.
Instead of just some amateur who keeps having, stumbling over dead bodies
Dumb luck.
year after year.
Right.
So I definitely thought, well, for better or worse, human nature doesn't really change that quickly. And so Caitlin is not going to be out of work.
Hmm. That's awesome. Before we get to the last question, one thing that I think people probably maybe don't always fully understand is how much writers end up not just they give back to each other. Put it that way, I guess. And especially in the form of whether it be conferences or for yourself, you were heavily involved in the president for several years of the Mystery Writers of America.
Yes,
So
that
talk
was.
about that because I think a lot of people, especially if they're not writers or if they're just getting into writing, they really think that generally speaking, most writers are just in their own little world. They don't have much support. They've got to write a story. And while that's true, you're on your own for a lot of effort. The community is simply amazing. That's the only way to, I think,
Yeah,
describe
and
it. So,
we throw the word community around, and often it's just a Band-Aid over a bunch of people who occasionally speak to each other. But
right.
in the case of certainly Mystery Writers of America, thriller writers,
Hmm.
crime writers in general, people have developed a real community that is very collegial.
Hmm.
And all those years you sit by yourself at home, maybe that's your jam,
Yeah.
but you can reach out. I wanted to write for so many years, and I finally got up the nerve. Don't ask me why it took nerve to go to a session at the Santa Barbara Writers Conference.
Hmm.
It wasn't about mystery or thriller writing, but I
Yeah.
just walking into a room with other people who wanted to write seemed daunting at the time, and instead it was just exhilarating. I left
Hmm.
just fizzing and hopeful, and the in the US and in the UK, there's a number of conferences you can go to. There are people who are dedicated to promoting and nurturing other writers in the genre who love it, who they're writers or they're readers who, start zines and websites and everything. And
Hmm.
so if if you're feeling lonely, you don't have to be.
Yeah.
You can take advantage of it. Don't wait to check out opportunities. Uh, you're going to find other people who are in exactly the same place you are. You're going to find either in struggling to get a first draft done, or deciding that you want to self-publish, or that you do want to publish and are going to look for an agent, and you can get uh, support and confidence and encouragement and friendship by not just sitting there quietly in your own head, even if it's
Mhm.
taking a class at your local community college,
Yep.
starting a writers group. I was in a writers group for many years that really really spurred me on. So there's a lot of options for you.
I used to do one years ago. I was closer at the time. I don't live as close to Asheville, but there used to be a group in Asheville, North Carolina, and that's actually where I met Jamie Mason,
Okay.
who's a crime writer.
Yes.
And now I just see her at conferences randomly. I don't head up to Asheville very often, but yeah, that network that you create, and you just that's what I try to tell people is you don't know who, because again, it's so daunting to write that first novel or whatever, the second, third, fourth, they can all be very
Mhm.
difficult, but you don't always know where to go next, and then you also don't know of like, okay, well, who can I reach out to help? And it's just like, no, this is a good group of people that not everyone can read your book for you, of course, but there are people willing to do it. And you can find beta readers out there that will give you the time and they'll give you honest feedback. Now, you got to be ready for honest feedback. And it's not always pleasant to be told that
Mhm.
you did something wrong or, I've told the story to people before. I had this one scene in my first book, The Body Man, where I want to have these bags of diamonds. And so I sent out early drafts to some readers, and one of the people that read it, it was a woman. She messaged me one night. She goes, "Hey, my husband wants to read the book. Do you mind if I?" Because I had said, "Don't give the book out. You know, this isn't
Mhm.
published yet. You can't be
Right.
forwarding this to people." So the lady named Janice reaches out to me and she goes, "Hey, can my husband read it?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, okay, as long as he's not given out to some random stranger." Well, a couple weeks later, I get a really kind email back from him, and he goes, "Now the only thing, Eric, is you have these diamonds in these bags." He goes, "That's not how you store diamonds." He goes, "I've been in the diamond business for so many years." And he said, because diamonds cut diamonds, he's like, those diamonds would be separated, whether it be an envelope or something. So it was a fix that was a really easy fix. And also, then anytime I've thought about that in the future, going forward, I've always remembered, hey, at least that detail I know. I talked to
Right.
someone that's actually in the industry. Again, circling back to when we talked about, Secret Service agents or FBI
Mhm.
agents, having those contacts can make all the difference. So
Right, exactly, and you never know, and you just scoop it all up. It's all material. And now I'm gonna use a scene where someone shows up with a bag of diamonds and the master criminal says, "Do you think I'm an oaf? You've got a bunch of scratched up diamonds in there. What kind of
exactly.
were you raised in a barn? You put your diamonds in bags?"
Please make sure the character is named Bishop. That's all. That's
Okay,
my only
okay,
request. Just make sure
all
the
right.
character in that scene is that the idiot's named Bishop is storing them
Mhm.
the wrong way. So, because at least I could look at that and be like, no, I would have done it right. That's what is Meg saying? So, well, Meg, my final question of the
Mhm.
night, and I end all my podcasts with the same question. So, you are clearly a writer, and I think you might agree with me that we all life is like a book, and we all have a first page and we all have a last page. None of us know how many pages fall in the middle between those first and last page, but as a writer, you get to the opportunity to write your last page. What would I know this is a very lightweight question thrown at you in, but what would your
Right.
last page say? What would you want that page to say?
To be continued.
No one has given me that answer, and I love it. That is so. I've had some interesting responses too, but I might have to steal that one. Is that copyrighted? I don't know. That sounds much better than the end. This to be continued. Well, Meg, thank you for your time. So where should people go out and get Shadowheart? What's the easiest way, or is there many ways?
Many ways. It is available at hopefully your local library, your local independent bookstore, or you can always order it from them. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, IndieBound, bookshop.org. It's available in hardcover, digital, and audio. The fantastic Hillary Hubert narrates the audiobook. And
Awesome.
if you find it, check me out, find me online, and I love to talk to readers about my book and anybody else's.
And if you read her book, folks, leave a rating and review if you can click over to Amazon or Goodreads, because those definitely do help to let people know that they need to read it as well. Thanks, Meg.
That's great. Yeah, thank you, Eric.
Appreciate it.
Congratulations on Breach of Trust.
Thank you very much.